and authority building, which is what I was doing through SEO, establish themselves locally as their authority.
Welcome to The Authority Matters. Once again, I'm Evan Mack. This is a monthly series from the Legal Podcast Network where we break down how authority is built online through media, distribution, and personal branding. In the first 3 episodes, we talked about founder-led media, how to get seen, and how to stand out. But today, we're talking about something that comes after that, and honestly, where most people get stuck, and that's growth. Because a lot of professionals are working hard, posting, networking, chasing leads, but it still feels inconsistent, up 1 month, then quiet the next. And that usually is because they're operating in chasing mode and not building mode. So today, I'm here with Dennis DM Meador, founder of the Legal Podcast Network, also known as Bam Man, and we're breaking down the difference between chasing opportunities and cultivating them intentionally. It's time to bam. Let's break it all down. DM, what's going on, brother?
I am good. It's, just went and saw my baby on a little monitor and heard the heartbeat and all that fun stuff. So how can that not be a good start to your day? And now, if you notice, it's not just the Legal Podcasting Network anymore. There's also another one over here. There's 2 babies coming. One's been delivered, and we are happy to have joining the family of the Authority Podcast Network, which is honestly, it just came about because we had so many people not in the legal industry that were joining and saying, I don't care if if I coach families on how to get their kids a scholarship in baseball. I want to work with you guys. So super excited about that. The Legal Podcast Network and now the Authority Podcast Network. So let's talk about growing. Let's talk about what next. I put the post up. What do I do now? So fire away, my friend.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about growth. Most people think growth comes from doing more outreach, post, and effort. But you've talked about the difference between chasing opportunities and cultivating them, DM. So what does that actually mean?
People that are chasing and just try and get that instant result, what they're doing with their marketing is they're trying to find that very small percentage in the marketplace. I've heard the stats throughout my career of it's, at any given time, there's 1 to 2% of people in the market for your services. And obviously that could be way narrower, that could be way larger of a category. But for things like who we're talking to, professionals, that's going to ring about true. At any given moment, there's, 1 to 2% of your marketplace are in the possible place of working with you. So when you're chasing, what ends up happening is you're always going after that 1 to 2%. Mm-hmm. So for you, marketing is just about getting the person that's going to walk in the door and say yes right now, versus cultivating understands that, sure, there might only be 1 to 2% right now who are in an active market, actively in the market for my services, my product, whatever. But during the life cycle of these people, there's probably going to be, think about it this way. If 50% of divorces end in marriage,
right,
half of people aren't getting divorced at any given time. Only a small percentage of them are going through that separation, that divorce, that part where it starts to get where they need you. And so cultivating understands that I'm building bridges, that I'm compounding trust, that I am putting myself in front of people on a consistent basis in a way that offers value so that when and if my services are needed, I am automatically already their person of choice. And that's what cultivating means. It's no different than if you think about it. You got the harvest, right, and you got the planting and the watering and the weeding and all the other stuff. Everyone wants to run out at harvest time and fight over the ears of corn. Mm-hmm. But who is going to be there to cultivate and develop their own field of individuals that they plant, water, keep the weeds away and all of the bugs away and all that stuff so that when the time comes, it's time to cultivate. And now, when that 1 to 2% hits your marketplace, a significant portion of them, or at least within your ecosystem, a good portion of them already see you as the person that they want to work with. So that's the biggest difference.
So DM, we could think about it like this, chasing is like going out every day and trying to find something to harvest, like you said, but cultivating is planting something once and letting it produce over time. So why is that distinction so important?
Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons. One is much more expensive, and that is chasing is much more expensive because that's what the vast majority of your competitors are doing. They're chasing that same 1%. If there's only one pretty girl in the bar, it's a lot harder to be the one to go home with her, right? Or
Yes.
whatever. So, the reality is that chasing is a lot more expensive. It's a lot more of your time being wasted because if they're in that 1% to 2%, guess what happens to all the marketing that happened to them once they fall out for the most part? You can no longer cultivate them.
Right.
Right. So, if I have somebody and you could, oh, I'm a criminal defense attorney, I've got a lot of repeat clients. Well, yeah, I mean, I know there are outlier, sort of niches, but for the most part, once that divorce comes, once that injury happens, once that estate and, trust and everything is put in place, once they've secured that, they're no longer in the nurturing place. The best thing you can do is to cultivate referrals from them, which is a different skill set, a different marketing strategy. We're not even going to get into that. And so when you are chasing after the 1%, it's expensive because there's a lot more competition for it. But then when you're cultivating, this allows you to understand that over time, trust is compounding with these people. And so getting them into your e-newsletter ecosystem, getting them into your daily posts. Now you're not having to pay big PPC keywords and, spend tens of thousands of dollars a month to be in front of them at that exact time because you have done more cost-effective, long-term strategies that allow you to cultivate them until they get to that point. And then, like I said, boom, now they're your client. I think, and I've been giving this illustration a lot lately, but I think it really fits here. My wife and I, as I just mentioned, we're getting ready to have a baby. We traveled to the city where we're going to be moving. There's a lot better health care. As I might have mentioned in the past, I live on a little island in Belize. And so not well known for their baby birthing facilities here, right. just a little FYI. So we went north to a city that has great health care, especially private health care, very affordable. And so we went and met with this doctor. And as we're meeting with this doctor, my wife had two doctors to meet. She's like, we're going to meet with these two doctors. I need to make a decision. So, okay. When we got to the end of the meeting, and as the meeting was going, he'd ask a question, she had the answer. Question, answer. And he's like, wow, you're really you're on top of your game. And she said, well, I do my research. And then we came to the end of it, and he very simply said, any more questions from you guys? And my wife said, no. I've been following you on Instagram for 2 years now. You were already my doctor. I just needed to come and meet you.
Yep.
And think about it. How much did it cost him to post to his Instagram consistently? Maybe a little bit of his time. But other than that, he didn't have to go and buy keywords for his city for birthing doctors and, doctors that do this special kind of birth. He had already planted a seed, watered it, and cultivated it. So that's another big differentiator is when you are a cultivator, it is maybe slightly more time intensive unless you do smart things like work with the Legal Podcast Network who can do everything you need in 30 minutes or less. No, just joking. But it can be a little more time consuming, but it can yield a much better crop. It yields much better clients because they already know you. They already see how you do things. They already trust you. And we didn't even ask him what it's going to cost. We just did it. This is boom. And we knew about what it would cost, obviously, because we had done research. But we weren't like, okay, how much is this? Like when we walked in the door. Because in my wife's mind, this was already her doctor. Why? Because over time, he had cultivated a modern relationship, a pseudo relationship, a social media relationship, whatever you want to call it, with, as he does however often he does it every week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week. I don't know the number, but he had watered those seeds. And when it came time for the harvest, walked in, didn't haggle pay, didn't question his authority, didn't question his capability. We just wanted to understand how this is going to work. And that's the difference between cultivating and when you are chasing clients. When you're the one being chased, you're now the prize.
Right.
And that's the other big difference is like, people will call into attorneys, they'll call into professionals, and a lot of times they're just calling down a list. And when everything is equal, what's the difference? Nothing really, other than price. And so a lot of people call attorneys now and call professionals, and the first thing they say, how much is it? But and that comes from being chased. If you think you're the prettiest girl at the ball, then you know that you've got your choice of suitors, right? And it's the same principle. With these other people, he had, for lack of a better word, courted them to that point where when the decision needed to be made, it was already made. And so that's the biggest difference is, it changes the dynamic of the way your client treats you. It changes the dynamic of how your clients approach you. It changes the dynamic of the cost, because cost is the secondary factor over trust and over authority that's been built over time.
So DM, let's dig a little deeper though. Why do so many professionals default to that chasing? The cold outreach, the constant posting, always trying to get that next client. Why does that feel unproductive even when it's not sustainable?
Well, again, unproductive because two reasons. One is it might not be the timing. I mean, it's just like rolling a roulette wheel at that point. Like, sure, every once in a while when you put the money down and the roulette wheel runs around, every once in a while, if you stay there long enough, it will land on your number.
Yeah.
And so you feel like you're good at roulette. But the reality is you're just throwing a ball onto a wheel that's spinning of this client that may or may not choose you out of a list of people in their mind. And so the chasing is exhausting. I mean, think about it. Would you rather live a life where I'm going to say, okay, you got two life paces. In one pace of life, you're going to chase everything. You're going to chase who you want to be with. You're going to chase where you want to live. You're going to chase all your money. It's going to be a constant grind, and you're going to always be going. Or this life, you're going to cultivate. You're going to plant a seed, and you're going to wait. And you're going to water that seed, and you're going to just sit back. And you're going to, take away the weeds, and you're just going to sit back. And then one day you're going to look over and there's going to be a nice big crop there, and you're going to be able to reap from that crop. And now you've got baskets and baskets upon opportunities, or in this case, clients. So one is much more mentally, emotionally exhausting, and you're kind of playing a roulette game of whether or not their ball of their business is going to land on your number at that point versus playing the farmer who already knows that's planted in my field. Outside of the occasional, raccoon or whatever it is that steals the corn off of the cob or off of the stalk, the reality is that's going to be my crop when it comes time. So that's why chasing becomes so exhausting versus cultivating.
So DM, what's the long-term cost though, of always being in that chasing mode?
I mean, you tell me. I mean, the reality is that there's a few long-term costs. One is cost of acquisition is going to go up. So, when you, again, are in a competitive place, you have to do more to get that client at that moment.
Yeah.
So the cost of acquisition alone is much higher per client when you're chasing into that small percentile versus cultivating into that larger eventual percentile. The other big cost is not just that, you're paying a premium to compete with other people, because the reality is this, most people, that's how they think marketing works. But this isn't 1957. We're not mass marketing on billboards to get the 1% to 2%. There was this little cool thing that came along in the late 90s, early 2000s called the internet. And the internet allowed us to track and pay attention and cultivate and segment our audience and see what people are responding to and see what turns into actual clients. Right. And we can actually track it. So when you're in that chasing mode of just that small percentage, again, it costs you more, but also you have to be more competitive with your pricing. And again, I've heard professionals say this, especially for the last decade of my career. I've been doing this 30 years, 20 years digital. The last decade, I have heard this sort of phrase more than any other time in my career, definitely. And it's this. Yeah, I'll say something like this to an attorney. Okay, so you're in Atlanta and you do divorce and you focus on higher assets. So you're like what, 750, something like that, with what, about a $30,000 retainer. And they might say, and I started hearing this 10 years ago, and I hear it more and more and more. They'll say something like this: I wish it used to be. It used to be I could charge $750 because I was the man. But now, with how competitive things are and the internet, and people just call down a list of attorneys, and they just when we quote them 750 or we try to get them in the office, they won't come in because they're shopping by price. So in order to be competitive, what used to be a $750 an hour attorney became a $625, became a $575, became a $495 attorney. And you could go across, the variables. I'm even seeing now, which you used to never really see in PI, which is like, it used to be 30 to 40%-ish. Like, they're even competing on contingency now. That's how competitive it is. It used to be like an unspoken rule almost of 30, 40%, depending on how far it goes in the process. Now they're saying things like 10% after we pay, costs, not including attorney fees. So even that industry is being impacted by the erosion of authority in the marketplace through internet. So while the internet's been great to cultivate, it's also been hard when you're playing the chasing game. Because, as I've said before, before, if you knew an attorney, maybe you went to church with them, they were in your Lions Club, they lived down the block from you, whatever, that was your attorney. Mm-hmm. But now you go on the internet and you got hundreds or thousands. Every attorney within 50 miles has got a beautiful website that says, I can help you. Yep. I went to Harvard Law 28 years ago and I won a mock trial versus somebody who's famous now. And, I really know what I'm doing. And then you go to the next page and the person's like, oh, no, I can help you. I've done this 20-something years, but I've won more cases than anybody else, and blah, blah, blah. And each one, it's just the same sort of rhetoric over and over. So that chasing of the 1% to 2% or whatever percentage it is for your industry, that chasing not only makes it cost more because more people are doing it, but it also brings down your cost itself because other people are bidding against you. When I am the only option for you because you followed me for 2 years and you want to work with me,
right?
What's price? As long as it's, within reason, I'm not going to leave that person over $2,000 total.
Right.
But if I'm only shopping on price, I probably will. And so that's what the cost really happens with chasing, is both of those things.
So D, I'm assuming someone, they shift out of that chasing mode, they get away from that. What does that intentional growth actually look like when they put it in practice?
So the first thing you have to do is you have to start building your databases. You have to start building places where you can collect. In other words, where are you going to plant these seeds? So, email, different social channels, video, YouTube. I'm a big proponent of obviously podcasting, and really I do all of those things. And so there's, LinkedIn, different social outlets, different, video outlets, different emails. Just, you've got to start investing your time and your resources in being good at kept media. Don't play the game of, hey, come over here and give me $15,000 a month, local attorney, and I'll get you X amount of clicks at blah, blah, blah per dollar, and that'll turn into this, and that'll turn into this. Now, if that turns you a profit, good, but don't get in that hamster wheel of that happening, and you are extremely vulnerable to PPC as a small to medium size, especially, let's talk about attorneys. They're the biggest, that's one of the biggest markets for PPC, or traditionally has been. You're extremely vulnerable as a small to medium because all it takes is one guy in your market to hit a big case or to get a big client, or a big monolithic law firm to decide, you know what, that little market over there looks pretty nice. I think I'm going to just buy it up. And they have the money to do it. So if you can't outspend these people, you have to outposition them. And that's what you have to start working on, is outpositioning in your marketplace, so that when the big firms come in, everyone goes, everybody knows that John Johnson is the divorce guy if you need it done right in this community. I don't know who that guy is out of, New York City coming down in here to Birmingham, Alabama, but everybody knows it's John Johnson that you work with in this market. That you have to have that positioning. So that's the first thing you've got to understand is you have to change where you're marketing and sort of the expected immediate results, but then you also have to change your position. Because when you're just like, hey, come on down, come over, I'll help you. That is a totally different conversation than, well, where are you at right now? Okay, well, what questions do you have? Okay, so when that happens, what happens is and this can be done at scale through video, podcasting, YouTube, content on your site. I'm not saying literally one-on-one every time, but when your content and your message goes from, hey, I am the best injury attorney west of the Pecos River. Like when it changes from that to, listen, I help like probably dozens of auto accidents a year. And one of the things that I really have seen hurt people more than anything else is these three things. Boom, boom, boom. Now the content and the message is about the person that you want to become your client, not about you and how much better you are and how much you've done and all the past stuff. Because when people feel sold to, there's an aversion to that. I read a quote a long time ago. I forget the guy's name. Big bald guy, sales trainer. He has like the little red book of sales, little black book of networking or things like that. And he's a pretty well-known sales trainer. But he said, people love to buy, but they hate to be sold to. And so when you're providing value above pointing to yourself, that's a cultivating approach, because you're saying, hey, let me help you. Well, I'm not even sure, like we're in counseling, we might work it out. That's fine. Watch this video just in case. If it helps you, great. I hope you never need it, but here you go, my friend. Have a good day. And again, I'm talking about doing this in kind of a virtual sense through media, but that's the message you convey when you are cultivating versus chasing.
So with that being said, though, you're talking about the cultivation. What are the seeds someone should be planting right now?
I would say, first of all, like I just said, the messaging, the seeds of the messages. If you've already got media going out, just look at the messaging. Is the messaging about you or them? Are the resources about how quickly they can get a hold of you, or are they about how quickly they can get the answers they need and you're there if they need you? So the first thing is, you have to kind of go in and when you're cultivating, you've got to start changing your language. But then you want to start building media that is long-term, that's owned media. The biggest one is email. Email still works.
Right.
Email, like our company, our number one driver of opportunities is email. Still. And you're like, wait, you're a social media guy. You're a podcast guy. Yeah, we get clients from podcasts and LinkedIn and every social media outlet out there. But I have an opted-in database of people that receive actually a daily tips and tricks email from me. Awesome. And then we have, cold cadences and sequences for people who they don't open it for 90 days. So then we hit it from a different angle. And how can we be of value here? And then, they opened it. Now let's get them back. And so you have to build this system of like checks and balances, but also like avenues and paths. So like, for example, if I'm a divorce lawyer, I start building a path of like, okay, this is my path, my funnel, my flow, my whatever, a game book or whatever phrase you want to use. But this is they really don't say that they have an interest in divorce, but I catch them peeking every once in a while. Now, maybe they're just peeking when they get in a fight with their significant other, but they're still peaking. So I got to stay like around them, and I got to stay soft with my messaging. It's not like come on down and get a free, consultation. I've got to be soft with my messaging, things to look for when there's cracks in the marriage, or, messaging like that helps them in the journey that they're at if it's needed. But now I've got this other segment of people who they're threatening divorce. They want a divorce. It's, for whatever reason, they're not there yet, but they're heading towards it. Now my messaging is more aggressive. My messaging is more, bringing them down, how to prepare, how to choose the right attorney. So you begin segmenting the people that you're talking to so that the messaging resonates with them wherever they are on the journey to becoming your client. And again, we could apply this to any number of different ways. I hope you never get into an accident, but if you do, well, we know whatever percentage of people get into a car accident. I've been in a car accident, got rear-ended, sitting there waiting for the light, boom, and I thought not much about it. I had to go to the chiropractor, and, I've been through it. And, I've been through a divorce. Thankfully, never had to utilize the services of a criminal attorney. But, the reality is that most people, for consumer-facing attorneys, at one time or another are either directly or indirectly going to need their services in some way. And so to understand that you don't just need the people that need you right now in your ecosystem, but you need to keep cultivating, providing value, assuaging fears, giving clarity every step of the journey, not in a way that's slimy, that, makes them feel like, I just can't wait for you to get a divorce, lady. I'm going to make some money off you, but in a way that is tasteful, in a way that is beneficial, and in a way that they feel like applies to where they are right now. So the content is huge in cultivation, and the delivery mechanism, like I said, email, different types of social media. Where do you go all in on social media? Where do you just have a presence? We're everywhere we can possibly be, but we have certain channels, and we're in the process of ranking and doing internal ranking. We want to be 100% the best we could be at email. We want to be, 95% the best we can be at cold email. And so the first one is more like opt-in email cultivation. Second one is pure cold email. Third, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably our number 3 channel. Then probably number 4, we were doing a little bit with X, Twitter, and doing pretty good with it for a while. And for whatever reason, it didn't quite yield what we wanted. So we said, let's get better at Instagram than we are at Twitter. And you just kind of understand that each one of these can be of benefit to you for different people in different parts of the journey. And so you just have to start learning who your people are, where they are, and what they need to hear. That isn't just come hire me right now, but actually provides value. So they keep you in their whatever you want to say, social media Rolodex, they keep you in mind, or at least in their algorithm enough to where when the time comes, you're already that person for them.
So we talked about the cultivation, DM. We talked about the different things people that they need to do, but let's get to the lightning round. That's true or false. It's, just give your quick gut reactions right off the top of your head. You ready?
Well, I have 3 choices, right?
What are the 3 choices?
True,
yeah,
false, or frou. And that means
you found a loophole.
I found a loophole because I want to explain more, but since I can only give a 1-word answer, if I give frou, that means it's kind of both.
Okay,
so
I like it.
If I throw a frou in there, don't get too caught off.
I won't. Okay, here we go. So let's start. Okay, so true or false, growth comes from doing more.
False.
True or false, you should always be chasing new leads.
False.
True or false, if you stop pushing, everything stops.
True sometimes. It depends on, are we doing cultivating or are we chasing? If you're chasing, true. If you're cultivating, false.
Okay. True or false, you need to do everything yourself early on.
False.
And finally, true or false, consistency is mostly about discipline.
I'm going to say false, but it's really a frou one because I want to explain it, but I'm not allowed to at this game. I'm staying within the rules of the game. So I gave one-word answers. And if you want the actual full answer for anything I said fru on, which I think was like 3 of these, then, inbox me on LinkedIn or something and be like, all right, what do you mean fru? Why is it true and false? Like, but that's the best I could do, man. Like, without having the little asterisks and the whole little, like, cliff notes at the bottom or notes at the bottom.
Yeah.
Those are my answers. True. I think it's true, fru, false, fru, or something like that.
Thank you very much, DM, for your time and your information, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for the full breakdown as well. If you got value from this, make sure you subscribe, because this is all part of the bigger system. We talked about how to get seen, how to stand out, and how to grow intentionally, because the goal isn't just attention, it's sustainable opportunity. If you want deeper breakdowns, templates, and monthly reports on topics like this, join our email list. We've got over 40,000 attorneys on that list. And if you want help building your podcast and authority system, you can apply to work with us. Links are in the description. I'm Evan Mack, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Authority Matters. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.